Hello, class, and welcome to Figures of Speech. So, to start us off today, why exactly should we speak figuratively?
What is figure of speech? Figures of speech is, well, it's speech that means something else, something that is non literal. Literal meaning the annotation from dictionary, and non literal meaning connotation, which is the intended or implicit meaning. Poetry often makes parallels between two similar things that we do not typically notice. For example, speak daggers as two strong words. You don't literally speak daggers, no one ever does. So connotatively, we attribute daggers to something that's harmful. It's strong. So we uh, distinguish speak daggers as strong words. These comparisons are called figures of speech. So figures of speech they occur when a writer or speaker or writer uses a word outside its usual denotation, which I say again, dictionary definition. So if it does not have it does not intend to use the original definition of it, then it's some sort of figures of speech. We'll get to later on. It is simply not expected for the literal to happen. You can't use the word for its literal meaning because it's using its dictionary definition. That's not figures of speech. So it's something that makes changes the original meaning to something else. Instead, we think about other words of similar connotation to arrive at a new meaning for that word of speech. Going back to the example earlier, daggers, which means sharp, which could mean hurts from speech. So figures of speech they must have a departure from its original meaning. It's implicit, not explicit. They don't tell you specifically that it's a figure of speech. That's important. Figures of speech add freshness as emphasis or a variety of other effects, such as life to poems. Much like any other poetic element, it has some sort of function and effect, and they're all unique based on the literature, type of literature it is. So, for example, one poem could use figures of speech for to add emphasis, while another one could add for freshness or something like that. Although figures of speech is supposed to be a departure from its original meaning, its literal definition still has some sort of value. By this, I mean that typically you refer to it when you think of daggers, you refer to weapons or, you know, anger or something like that. So it's not entirely a separation from its literal meaning, but it's enough to say that its literal definition wouldn't make sense. So, the process of identifying and analyzing figures of speech. First, you must read the poem literally, line by line, note the literal meaning of the poem versus dictionary definition. So these are, well, if you were to read figures of speech literally, some parts might stick out. So that's the second process of identifying, which is identifying odd parts. Look for parts that make you go, huh? Those are the problem. Those are the parts where it doesn't seem to make sense with the original definition. So after you identify these odd parts, you attach words or phrases of similar connotation. So when you think of the object or phrase, what does it make you feel or think about? That's so that you're able to uncover the intended meaning. Read the poem and see if it makes sense using what you made out through that connotation. They're supposed to give you some sort of idea of what they're trying to convey. And so by doing that, you'll be able to uncover what the author is trying to convey through that figure of speech. And after that, you analyze the figure of speech. You note the effect with or without the speech. Why is there? Its function, its effect. Typically, again, what you do with any other element of poems or literature.
So, what types of figures of speech do we have? Well, we actually have quite a few, but let's start with the two that most people know, that being simile metaphor. So, of course, simile is a comparison to two things, usually indicated by some kind of connective, usually like, as, then, or a verb like resembles. So, an example we have is someone is as sweet as honey. So even though it expresses a similarity, the items being compared should be dissimilar in kind. So of course, a person isn't exactly similar to honey. Then we have metaphor, which is a statement where that one thing is something else when in a literal sense it isn't. For example, we can say someone is a shining star, which of course, not really. So it's essentially like a simile, but it doesn't contain a connective as a simile does. We also have another kind called the implied metaphor, which is one that uses neither connective nor the verb to be. We want an easy way to tell the difference. It's that simile often refers to only one characteristic that two things have in common, while a metaphor is not plainly limited in the number of resemblances it may indicate. Let's go ahead and look at some other ones. We also have personification, which is a figure of speech in which a thing, an animal, or an abstract term is made human, such as comparing the sun, say, for example, the sun glared down on us. We have apostrophe, which is a way of addressing someone or something invisible or not ordinarily spoken to. We have overstatement, also known as hyperbole, which is a figure of speech in which something is exaggerated for effect, and its opposite, understatement, which is where the opposite, or where it is implied that the subject is more than stated. We have metonymy, which is where the name of a thing is substituted for that of another closely associated with it. We have synecdoche, which is the use of a part of a thing to stand for the whole of it or vice versa, and we have a paradox, which occurs in a statement that at first strikes us as self-contradictory, but once looking at it again, it makes more sense. So, how exactly can we see these figures of speech in action? Let's take a look at this example poem. We have Metaphors by Sylvia Plath, written in 1960. I'm a riddle in 9 syllables, an elephant, a ponderous house, a melon strolling on 2 tendrils. Oh, red fruit, ivory, fine timbers. This loaf's big with its yeasty rising. Money's new minted in this fat purse. I'm a means, a stage, a cow and calf. I've eaten a bag of green apples. Boarded the train, there's not getting off.
So, to analyze this figure of speech, the first line, which says, I'm a riddle in 9 syllables, each line is 9 syllables, and by saying I'm, the author is attributing herself to each consecutive line after this, which has the 9 syllables. So, we see the words elephant, house, melon, loaf, fat, purse, cow, and bag, which typically attributes to big or encumbering, something that's not really it's heavy. It's heavy for sure. The third line, or one of the lines, mentions melon strolling, which is not really mobile. You don't really see a melon moving around too fast, so it's not really, not really movement. There's no movement in it. One of them mentioned yeasty rising, so I don't know if this is, there's no way to tell if it's negative or positive. Yeasty rising just, it shows that there's some progression in here. It's something that's still going on. So after that, it's eating a bag of green apples, which you'd probably, when you eat something, you attribute it to your stomach, around the stomach region. And then after that, you get the words new minted, calf, no getting off, which is like newly made or, well, babies, I guess. The no getting off part meaning that you can't really leave them behind, or rather, this is a commitment. So, as a whole, from these connotations, we get the idea of food, maybe money, immobility, and commitment. So, from these, we're able to decipher the theme of the poem, which is pregnancy. Alone, the poem does not make sense, but by connecting the possible meanings or connotations of the words that does not make sense to us, we're able to create some sort of message, something that the author is trying to convey to us. So I've done some research on this poem. The poem was written when the author was having a baby, so she was in her pregnancy, and so that's where the connotations and stuff like that. That's where the messages formed to make that. So this is figures of speech. When you're analyzing figures of speech, make sure to read literally. Make sure that you're able to find the connotation so you could discover what the meaning of the author is. It's a possibility that it may be hard to find, but that's just an element of being a figure of speech. It's not something that's easily or explicitly stated.
So, right. Thank you for watching and listening, and well, we hope this helped you understand figures of speech a little bit better. Until next time.
Goodbye.